What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the God and Country podcast. Daniel, Ethan here for you. Ready to hit another episode. Today we're going to talk about war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Stupid. So we're going to talk about war. Is there good war? Is it all bad war? Yeah. How should, obviously, as we do every episode, how should believers address the topic of war? Maybe get into some different facts about American war and stuff, just because we're in America.
Oh yeah.
But so we're going to talk about war. Talk about maybe on a broad scale how it affects. Try to maybe get it down to more of a personal level. Check the Bible. See what it says about war. What it says about warriors, those that do war, those that war, and talk about just some different stuff like that. So I guess just to get into it, I mean, really, first, kind of just define the topic. I guess as always, what is war?
What is guerra?
Obviously, I mean the definition of war is a state of armed conflict between nations or states or different groups within a nation or state. So there can be civil war.
Right.
There can be
gang war.
World war. There can be American-Spanish war, just different, different types, I guess, of war.
But we also have Cold War that's not hot.
Yeah.
It's only fought in the cold areas of the world. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, then it does also in the definition say that war can be a state of competition, conflict, or hostility between different groups or people or groups. Sorry. So, I mean, obviously the Cold War is an example of a technological war. Mm-hmm. To not get into it, but there's people would say there's a cyber war going on or information war going on right now between the establishment parties and those that are not so establishment.
There's definitely been one that's going on in broad daylight between Chinese intellectual property and American intellectual property. That one's been going on for a few years now.
Yeah.
That's affected some serious businesses here in the States. So, but that's what war is conflict, an elevated state of conflict, right? Because, me and my wife, we have conflict sometimes, but it's not war.
I wouldn't say it's a real battle.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know. Sometimes it can get a little heavy,
there's conflicts, but obviously war is a big, another one says here, war is intense armed conflict between states, governments, societies, or paramilitary groups such as mercenaries, insurgents, or militias. Yes, I mean, the whole of human history has been at war since the fall of man, pretty much. I mean, men have fought over everything you can think of: land, oil, other resources.
Laws that kind of are arbitrary.
Assassinations in one country sparked
my friend got hit by somebody who got hit by a friend.
That's one thing that blows my mind about World War I is that it started with an assassination of a guy in Europe, a Tsar in Austria.
He was a duke or something.
Yeah. And then it started a whole world war.
Yeah, and there were family members in the royal families on either side.
Yeah.
The Windsor family in England was related to the Tsars, the Tsars in Russia, closely related, second cousins. So, war, that's what war is, armed conflict, people getting mad at each other, shooting each other, people not being mad at each other and still shooting at each other. They're just soldiers out there doing their thing. And even gang wars, you just kind of, you're a 14, 15-year-old kid and somebody that you look up to, a mentor or somebody who, helped you out when you were younger or whatever, they just pull you into
tell you to go
violence and then that's what you do, and you don't like somebody because of the clothes they wear or where they live.
The block that they come from,
So that's kind of what war is, but is war in the Bible? We always try to take it to the Bible, God and country, right? Of course war is in the Bible. And I think the reason I wanted to talk about it when Daniel brought it up was because even though it says, God has said a couple times to wage total war on people. He told the nation of Israel to completely destroy several people groups. and they were supposed to go in and not spare a man, a woman, a child, even the animals. Just an absolute bloodletting of anyone who lived there or was owned by them or was them, And it might sound harsh, but that's he was doing it for Israel's protection. Israel was his people, and those people were invited. I mean, they could have joined, but no, they hated God. So that's kind of how it went. I know that in the Psalms, David says, "You teach my hands to war. You teach me how to fight better," kind of thing. And I think that's all interesting because a lot of people think that Christians should be like more pacifists than fighters. Yeah. So war is actually throughout the Bible. I mean, First, Second Samuel. And then was it Kings? First, Second Kings, and then Chronicles, and through Isaiah, through Jeremiah, because Jeremiah and Daniel and stuff, they get taken off, so there's not really a lot of war in there. But then there's prophecies about war throughout all the big prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, especially Daniel.
Yeah,
Hey, it's your boy.
It's your boy.
It's your boy out here prophesying about that war, boy.
But I mean, even in Ecclesiastes, I've got this scripture pulled up. I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 3. I'll start in verse 1. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. In verse 3 says a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. And this is the ESV, by the way. But in verse 8, it specifically says a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I mean.
Yeah.
And he could be talking about spiritual warfare here, or, obviously God has called men to wage war on people. God called David to kill Goliath.
Yep.
So there's, it's like the last episode of Censorship. I can't say it's like all bad.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not black and white.
Yeah.
But the reason I want to point it out is because it's not so much gray either. A lot of it is circumstantial.
Yeah, like there's things going on.
It's not like one of these things where people are just like, oh, well, if it happens, it happens. It's not necessarily like that. We should be against war, but also supportive of people who are willing to fight and sacrifice for it.
Yeah,
for
and I think war waged in truth, or waged for truth is probably a good thing. But like nowadays, I mean, in America, I'll just straight up say it, all the wars that we've been in since 2001 are not one. I think the invasion of Iraq, I believe, was voted for by Congress, but everything else since then, like the invasion of Libya that completely destabilized a somewhat stable nation in the part of the world that they're in. Now they're in the middle of a civil war with slavery, trafficking, all kinds of stuff breaking out. We're in Syria now. There's tons of stuff going on in the Middle East that is just like not.
It's not, and I mean, really, the United States of America hasn't. No, not at all. The United States of America hasn't been actually at war, quote unquote, from a legal sense since 1945.
Yeah,
when Japan surrendered, that was the last time that we were actually at war. All the rest of it was armed conflicts and authorizations of the president to use armed force in various areas. Yeah,
because Congress extended war powers for the presidents during that time. Like Vietnam was not a war.
Not at all.
Korea was not a war, even though they call it Vietnam War, Korean War. It's not a legally declared constitutional war.
Right. I mean, if the whole thing in Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down, if that had lasted longer than maybe say it lasted longer, maybe double than what it did, we would call that the Somalian War. I'm sure we would definitely call it that, but because they were in there based on some kind of legal precedent, but it wasn't the legal precedent of war.
Yeah,
and that's more of an American thing. Not so much the biblical standpoint. And the reason that I wanted to point that out is because, as Americans, I don't think that we should be for war, period. We shouldn't be, yes, let's go to war, people. War needs to be a last resort.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on how bad the war is, we would be fighting the war.
Yeah.
Because we would be drafted.
We've been at war since 9/11. I mean, and I think 9/11 obviously is like a circumstantial thing where I think going after the right people that did it,
We're not getting into that, Daniel.
No, yeah, I'm not good. But like, I think it's justifiable to go after the right people that did something as terrible as that. Now, there's a ton of stuff surrounding 9/11 that we could get into, but we're not going to get into. But just as like a basic understanding of it, like 9/11 as a precedent to go to war, I think is a justifiable thing.
Yes.
We
An attack on citizens, attack on soil. I would even say an invasion. So let's say they didn't actually kill 3,000 people. They just kind of ran up on us and started shooting cops and took over the docks in New York or something.
Yeah, that would have been, dude.
That would have been wild, but like, I would have been one of the people that would have been like, let's go kill them in their country.
Oh, yeah.
Send in the Marines.
Threw the hammer down on some fools, I'm telling you.
But I mean, I'm not. The reason that I want to point it out is because I don't think that as Americans we should be gung ho.
Oh no, absolutely not. I'm not just like
politically. What are they called? The hawks and doves.
War hawks.
War hawks. Yeah. I used to kind of agree with that, but I mean, my ideas of war was movies and video games. Yeah. I wasn't actually. Duty. Yeah, Call of Duty all day. But like. And then I'm thinking, in the Bible, it says that we should go wage war on, this, that, and the other. But that's not really what he means as individuals. And I'm not sitting here quoting "thou shalt not kill," because I understand that when he says "thou shalt not kill," one means contextually in the nation. Don't kill your national brothers. Don't kill other people. Don't kill my people is what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And then also contextually, that word "kill" means murder, premeditated, hateful taking of life. Not so much following order or self-defense, those necessarily aren't the same things in the eyes of the Lord, because then he goes and tells, that's kind of one of those contradictional things, that people could probably point out. In the 10 Commandments, it says thou shalt not kill, but then he tells them to kill women, children, babies, and goats, and the Amalekites, Amalekites, or whatever it's called.
Well, he's God, so.
Right. If
anybody can make an exception to the rules.
To rules, it's God. But I'm saying if he is the Lord, he changes not, then that must mean that our understanding of kill is different.
Yeah,
we don't have the whole picture there. So that's why I'm pointing that out, because, when Daniel presented that we talk about war, I don't imagine that this is going to be a single episode. It might not be a part 1, part 2, but we'll probably retouch it again.
Get into it later. Get into some more detailed intricacies and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But I definitely wanted to mention, in as much as I don't support war, especially the war that we're in right now, the wars, I definitely supporting the warriors, the fighters, the soldiers. Yeah. That's a different thing. These men and women
that are willing to put their lives on the line to
not see their families.
Yeah, I had
something that they probably don't actually believe in.
Yeah, a lot.
At least in our day and age.
I've got a buddy right now who's in the Navy, who's deployed in Japan. And he's not obviously it's not in the middle of some conflict.
He's not in some hot zone.
He's like, I can't. He's like, it kind of sucks because I'm just stuck on the ship and I can't do anything.
Yeah. I got a friend of mine
because Corona,
Yeah, I got a friend of mine who he's in Guam right now. He got deployed last week to Guam. He's in the Navy, and he's just taking pictures of the sunset every day, putting it on his Instagram story, and he's like, sunset in Guam. He's a funny guy, so I feel like he's he's kind of cheery and stuff. But I had asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, it's a little difficult, being in the military and trying to be like me as a Christian. And so then I start supporting him and stuff.
Yeah.
But if the Congress or the president wants to send him to war, I'm going to be like, no, don't send him and, all of our others, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers and stuff that go to war. Don't send them to war. They're going to die. And then they do it. And then we hear about some atrocity in another country, blah, and then they come home. I'm not going to spit on him. I support the soldiers. I support the war fighters and stuff.
I think there's things, obviously, that they can do that are, pretty terrible, all the torture stuff that came out, that a while back in the prisons in Iraq where they're stacking dudes on top of each other and all kinds of just weird, crazy stuff. But I definitely, like you said, I'm gonna respect those people because they are putting their lives on the line, whether they believe it's for my freedom or not, whether I agree with why they're doing it or not. I'm gonna respect that because that.
Respect that sacrifice
because that's that. Yeah. It was something I thought about in school, but I never obviously I didn't do it. I could be out by now. If I went with the minimum or whatever, just to get GI Bill benefits or something. Right. But then it was definitely something I thought about because it makes that path easier after you get out. But we've got men and women scattered everywhere across the globe.
Literally
and it's
everywhere.
Not as far as the country, to bring the countryside into it, that's not a legal function of America's military. We're not supposed to have so many bases in like 170 something countries around the world.
Right.
You know, they're supposed to be here to help defend our nation from enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right.
But you know, maybe there's a reason why people in power want them to be scattered everywhere, because we'll be weaker as a nation.
Speaking of weakening our military, you know, people they put out a memo in the military that if you were tested positive for COVID, that you can't join. And,
yeah,
you know, and it's like, why? Because it's the flu, or no? You know, so I mean, it's that's another reason that I don't think that as Americans, as Christians in America, that we should be so gung-ho on going to war or sending our neighbors to fight for us, because it is a heavy thing.
Yeah, I grew up, there's a guy that, he was a few years older than me. He graduated before I even got to high school, but he grew up a couple houses down the street, so him and other kids that were on the street, we would all hang out and play together and stuff. And after he graduated, he went to the Army, and he ended up getting killed in battle. And so that was like a real tough thing, you know, because once he got to high school, I didn't hang out with him obviously as much, because he didn't want to like hang out with a 5th and 6th grade or whatever, you know. But like I remember like coming home and one day, and my mom told me what happened to him. His name was, I can't remember his last name. His first name was Michael, and he was always just like a super cool guy. He was really friendly with the younger kids and, you know, and stuff. But I mean, he went to battle and got killed while he was in war. And I know that was really tough on his parents, having to deal with that, losing his son. I think he was like 18 or 19. I mean, he was real young when it happened. So he was only a little while into his service. And that was like that's like a thing. It's like I have a direct experience of how upsetting,
right, how that can affect you.
Yeah. So I have a direct experience of that. So it's I'm 100% like in agreement with you that we shouldn't be so gung ho to send our military to go fight for whatever, because we shouldn't send our military to go fight in Syria, because people, you know, could go die in Syria for what? Because they're having a civil war?
Yeah, and I mean, I would even, as far as politics goes, I would even say that the only reason that we should go to war is because we were attacked or someone tried to invade and we were fighting them off. You know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, all of the other options are, you know, kind of existential. I war with Japan, they attacked us. Going to war with the Nazis, they declared war on us. You know, I mean, they
tried to get Mexico to.
They tried to get Mexico to attack us and things like that. I mean, but if you send someone to go die, or if we are like, oh yeah, let's go to war as America, and then our leaders send people that are, you know, living in the streets with us, and they send them to die, the leaders aren't actually going to war. You know, the Congress who sends people to war isn't going to war.
And it's most of the time it's not their children either.
They get out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, in the back of your mind when you're like, well, it was justified because of this. And I'm like, is it really justified when you see all the boys coming home in caskets?
Yeah, or, you know, or deformed or missing
limbs, and they all, you know, all these, you know, men and women have, you know, various mental problems.
Yeah, it happened a lot with the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
a lot of vets
extremely traumatizing stuff, and then these people are just supposed to rely on the VA to take care of them.
Dude,
you know, so you know, is war a good thing? Yeah, war is bad, but we respect warriors. We honor them.
Yeah.
We actually cherish those people who are willing to sacrifice that much for us, and I would even say that we look to them and hope that if we were ever put in that position, that we would do the same.
Yeah.
I would even go that far. Now, as you know, God and country, let's take it back to the God side. Should believers, you know, wage war? I think it was, what's it called? Hacksaw Ridge. Sorry. Hacksaw Ridge, about that dude that was
story, he was a pacifist.
He was a pacifist.
7-day Adventist. And they believe in pacifism, I think. Or
and he just like wouldn't fight,
not using weapons or something like that. Yeah,
he was drafted, you know, World War II, and he was supposed to, you know, go fight, and they sent him up on this ridge, you know, Hacksaw Ridge or whatever. He ended up saving a bunch of guys, and it was this really heroic thing. Great movie.
Wonderful movie.
But the whole reason he didn't fight is because of "Thou shalt not kill."
Yeah.
And if I had a gun and people were shooting at me and he was the guy next to me and he had a gun, he wasn't shooting back at him, I'd be like, bro, like, shoot back.
Yeah.
At least you
but
can
that's
miss.
that's why he didn't even carry a weapon.
Yeah, he didn't even carry a weapon.
He was just a medic, and I'm pretty sure medics would carry weapons.
Yeah, they had sidearms and stuff, yeah.
But he didn't even carry a weapon, which is like brave.
Right,
like that's trusting God when you're running out of, I mean, because that battle was pretty
intense,
pretty rough.
Most of the most of the Pacific War was considerably more intense than
the European theater.
Yeah, because the European theater, they would dig trenches and stuff. The Pacific, you're on a boat and then you're on a beach. You have where are you gonna dig a trench, bro? Like, where are you gonna hide? But should believers wage war? And I wouldn't say that believers should or should not wage war. I think, again, it's circumstantial. If you're drafted, the Bible says to obey the law.
Yeah.
If you aren't drafted and you're like, oh, I'm going to sign up, I would pray about it.
Yeah,
right?
definitely make sure that the Lord is telling you to do that.
Yeah, I know a Raymond guy that graduated at Bible school with me. He joined in the Army and stuff, and he was talking to me. And a friend of mine recently was saying, it's hard because these guys, we're all military. We're all supposed to be like men's men. And then, I mouth off at one of them because I'm mad or something. And like, oh, that's a very Christian thing to you to do. And so it's like he's not even actually fighting, and he's having a hard time as a believer in the military because it's not necessarily it's not an environment that's necessarily conducive to, godly life. Because you're practicing killing people, you're in the mindset of I got to kill people, so it's not like you're out here just loving your brother. So it's a little tough. It's not the I feel like if God tells you to do it. If God if you have a grace on your life to build a career out of that and take care of your family from there, by all means. But that doesn't necessarily mean that yes or no Christians should wage war. I think it's considerably circumstantial.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm just solely on the line. It's like, if God tells you to, if you're hearing from the Lord and that is what God is telling you, then by all means do what you're going to do, or do what the Lord's telling you to do, and trust in Him to protect you. And like Deuteronomy 21 says, when you go to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army greater than yours, do not be afraid of them, because the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt will be with you. Right. So trust the Lord that He's going to accomplish whatever it is that He's trying to accomplish with you being there. Right. That could be, because right now, since our military is being world police, that could be leading someone in that nation to the Lord,
exactly,
or something.
Exactly.
that could
working
be
a miracle for a family that you're staying with or something.
Yeah, that could be like the whole reason He called you to be in that. So make sure you're filled with the Word. Make sure that you are praying and continually walking with the Lord while you're doing that, because I know it's a tough deal. I mean, like my buddy that's in Japan right now, he's got a wife and two kids, I believe. It's been a few years since I've seen him, so but he's got a wife and two kids, and that's like, I mean, obviously, like, he hates that he can't like go outside and stuff, but like being away from his family, he's like, I miss my kids and stuff, because I sent him something of Jack, like a video of Jack or something, and he hasn't got to meet him yet because he's been in the military. Yeah. He's been in Florida and then got to Japan. But he's like, that's like the toughest part, is not being able to be with my family, because that's really what he's called to do, is to be his leader. But he's doing that so he can provide for his family. So, and I know that him particularly being in the military is one thing that he really thought about and like took time to
really evaluate.
And decide if that was his best option. And I think he's been enjoying it. But it's tough, like in more aspects than just fighting and dying.
Yeah, I mean, you're sacrifice your life. You could be in the military, sacrifice 8 years, 4 years, whatever contract size is, of your life, without actually putting your life in harm's way. Yeah, or in a firefight or whatever, because you're spending months and months and months away from your family. So, and even if you don't have a family, you're spending months and months and months, and you're just under someone's control. They tell you what to do. Yeah. So, but I do want to point out, as we read a couple scriptures, that in the new covenant, in the New Testament, in our relationship with the Lord, a lot of what happened to Israel, actually all of what happened to Israel, in the Old Testament is supposed to be as an example to us. It's our example. It's something that we're supposed to glean a lesson from. So in Deuteronomy, when he said, when you go to war with your enemies, he was literally talking about Israel going to war with the Hittites and the Jebusites and all these people. When we read that and we appropriate that to our lives, he's saying when you go to war with sickness, when you go to war with poverty, when you go to war with demons that are manifesting themselves in people around you in different situations, don't be afraid. The Lord will be with you, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like the scriptures that's like, you teach my hands to war means that we should learn how to fight so we can kill people. That's period. It means that we should, of course, learn how to defend ourselves. But
please.
But the teaching us to war is more, God teaches us how to stand up in the spirit in ways that spiritual warfare, and like it talks about in Ephesians 6. So, hit me with another scripture, bro.
I think this one's really good, and this is New Testament, James 4,
New Testament
1 through 2. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. I think that's a pretty good one, because I mean, like, obviously I think a lot of like wartime stuff that goes on nowadays is a lot of men that desire something somewhere else, or, want power or control.
Especially like, assets. A lot of assets.
Yeah, so the desire comes from within themselves, and then because they have the ability, because they're in a certain position, or because they have money and can influence people in certain positions, they start conflicts, or so that I think that's a pretty good one. And then 2 Corinthians 10:4 is the weapons we fight. Like, he goes along with what he was just saying, that like when you read the scripture in the Old Testament that talks about going to war, it's not that we're fighting physically. We obviously, that's something that can happen, but 2 Corinthians 10:14 says the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have the divine power to demolish strongholds. So I think that goes really good along with what you were saying, just that we come to battle with things like sickness and disease and demons and whatever.
Poverty and hatred and all this stuff.
But we fight against those things not in the physical realm. Right. I mean, obviously sickness will affect your body physically, but
it's not like you can put a gun up to cancer and be like, die.
You die. You leave me, tumor. But I mean, that'd be pretty great. But
that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's like as New Age, I don't want to say New Age because that's real dangerous. As New Testament believers, have spiritual weapons that we fight with, and then obviously in Ephesians, called to put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. That's Ephesians 6:11. So we have a spiritual armor that protects us as well, and we also have in sword of the Spirit, the Word of God, we have a spiritual weapon to fight against these things that we're most likely going to come against in our lives.
Right. And along with as we talk about the Bible, we talked about what about thou shalt not kill, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about should believers wage war and stuff. There's another aspect of it that I wanted to mention, especially historically, in other religions as well, holy war, right? I kind of mentioned it in the last episode. When God tells you to go to war and kill somebody, you do it. But that's not really what he told us to do as New Testament believers. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't so much that God hated people. It was that he had something stolen from him in the earth, right? So the pieces of land. And then he had something stolen from him also, as in man. Man was stolen from him. So he found a man and he said, I'm going to give you land. And to make that happen, he had to move people out. And then they knew that it was coming. They had already voiced we think that people in the old days, just everything was a surprise because they didn't have phones, but that's not really what we see throughout historical texts, is that people actually learn about things through, various ways of communications, birds flying with notes and people passing, they had signs and stuff from wall to wall, fortress to fortress, to pass word and stuff. things got around by word of mouth. So these countries, these rulers and groups of people knew that Israel was coming to take what God promised them, but they were like, nah, this is mine. So they fought them. And so that's why God was like, go ahead and kill them because they're going to try to kill you, you know? Mm-hmm. So, but that's not really what we're looking at as New Testament believers. Jesus actually pointed out that a lot of us are going to be martyred, both when he was here on the earth and when he was talking to John in the book of Revelation, that there's going to be a lot of martyrdom. And that was one big reason that I wanted to jump on this topic, is because whatever you believe about the end times, whatever you believe about the tribulation, and whether it's pre-trib and we're not going to experience any troubles, or mid-trib and we're just going to have a little bit of problems but not really, or it's post-trib and we're going to get the worst of it, the Bible says that there will be blood of saints spilled just all over the place. And so that's not really the same as God's going, hey, go kill those people and take their land. That's more us laying down our lives. Yeah. But how does that line up with the American war machine, or the British war machine, or the, wherever you're at? It goes back to the laws, right? Where your nation's laws end, your nation's laws are beneath God's laws. Mm-hmm. And so if they come at you because you believe in Jesus, I would say lay down your life. Yeah. But if they come at you to take, if they're invading California and they're like, hey, we need an army real quick from, Galveston County, Texas, I'd be like, okay, let's go. Let's go do what we got to do. Because of the laws part, the government says we need an army, we need fighting people, and they go take care of what they got to do because they're someone's invading your land, but don't pretend for a second. What I'm saying is, don't pretend for a second that it's like a holy thing, that God sent you to war in Afghanistan, or God sent you to war to do this, that, and the other. And, he wanted you to kill these people and displace these people and stuff. It's not that really God wanted you to do that. It's that's just where your life led. Mm-hmm. There were choices made by people way before you, generations. And then that led up to the choices that you made. Yeah. Like I said in the last episode, God isn't playing with us like we're Barbie dolls. We make our own decisions, and in that we can still rely on the Lord and to be faithful and protect us and things like that. So I would just, one, is holy war a thing that Christians can do? No, it's not. No, just no. But what about, warriors and war? Like we said earlier, and this episode is, relatively shorter compared to the last 2 or 3 episodes, but mainly because there's not so much to say. There's not a lot of ground to cover, because war isn't necessarily different every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing that changes is the technology that it's fought with.
The technology and the people doing it.
Yeah. So,
but the concept is the same. Yeah, it has been since the beginning.
And I would say, like, really, as far as like the only war that Christians are truly called by the word to wage is spiritual warfare. Yeah. So like choosing to be a part of the army, again, like if you're going to do it, seek the Lord. Seek his peace. Yeah. And make sure that that's what he's really calling you to do, and not just something that you want to do because you're an American and you want to.
Because America.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, and 100% totally have respect for anybody that chooses to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean, really, as believers, I think the only thing that we're called to specifically wage is spiritual warfare, and get people saved. Yeah. And I mean, if you're halfway across the world shooting people, probably not the best witness.
But that's where it comes in circumstances.
Yeah,
if you're a grunt, I was reading a book from General James Mattis. He was in charge of the Marines invading Iraq, and he was talking about how when the battle was going on up and down, because they would travel on the highways, that the Marines would move forward and create a perimeter and kind of build a stronghold just on the road to let everybody catch up, and then do it again and again. And so he was kind of in the stronghold part, and he would go meet the grunts, and they would be talking and they'd be joking around, and he'd be like, oh, I respect these guys, yada, yada, yada. But if you're the grunt guy, the things that we're talking about conceptually, that's more for the generals to think about, or congressional people who send the generals to take all these guys to war. Yeah. If you're the grunt, you don't have a lot of control.
You can't do what you're told. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, you do what you're told. And, if that's what you want to subject yourself to, if the Lord actually does tell you to do that, then by all means. I've never met anybody who was told by the Lord to join the military during wartime for war purposes.
Yeah.
I do know of some people who were given an opportunity to join the military for purposes like education and taking care of their family, and it actually worked out for them, and they have a nice career and all this stuff. But not everyone who joins the military does it for those reasons. So I mean, if you're joining up like, God wanted me to go kill these people, like no, he didn't. Actually no.
Yeah,
so,
God doesn't want you to kill people.
Right.
Pretty much,
and so
in general.
yeah, pretty much in general. So, just as you make those decisions, make sure that your heart is right. Really, really seek the Lord if you're going to do that. I like what Daniel said, just really rely on the Lord. And, we respect those decisions for people, across the board, even like police officers and, firefighters and, people who have these massive sacrificial jobs,
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so as much as we respect that and everything, I think we're going to wind this one down. We're going to give you some facts and stuff. Probably skip the story this one because we are talking about war, which is basically a story.
Yeah.
And then, do some facts and stuff. Just, American war.
Yeah.
Facts.
Like kind of some troop numbers, deaths, some little facts about different wars. So of course, obviously going to start with the Revolutionary War.
Oh yeah.
It was waged 1775 to 1783. It looks like the U.S. had a total troop engagement of 217,000 men, had 4,435 deaths total in the war. And that says battle deaths. So, there could be, other casualties that they're not counting.
Right,
but
prisoners of war.
Yeah, battle deaths. So, obviously, this is when the 13 American colonies fought for independence from British rule. The first shots rang out on the morning of April 19th, 1775 in Lexington, Massachusetts. One of the early signs that pointed to that the Americans had a chance at possibly defeating the well-trained British troops was at the Battle of Bunker Hill, when colonial officer William Prescott ordered his soldiers to not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. So they were letting the British soldiers advance until they could were really up close, and the Americans can just mollywop them.
Mollywop.
Congress had chose George Washington as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Battle of Saratoga was the first great American victory of the war and is widely believed to have been the turning point that led America to triumph over Britain. And the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783 when Great Britain acknowledged America's independence. The treaty established a northern boundary with Canada and set the Mississippi River as the western boundary. So that's the Revolutionary. Obviously, there's wars between the Revolutionary War and the next one I'm going to get into, which is the Civil War. I know it was 1861. Yeah, the war began on April 12th, 1861, and the South surrendered at Appomattox, Virginia in 1865. Total troops involved were 2,213,363, and there were a total of 140,414 battle deaths. So it's interesting to me that one of the more deadly wars that the United States has been involved in was a war with itself.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I heard that fact, and everyone was like, "Isn't that interesting?" And I'm like, "No," because they were fighting them. Duh.
Yeah.
But then, I started thinking about it, I was like, "Okay, I see why they think it's a big deal because we shouldn't fight ourselves, right?"
Yeah. But so the northern states and southern states fought over slavery and other states' rights issues. 7 states seceded from the Union, including South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Arkansas, North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee followed, bringing the total seceded states to 11. They called themselves the Confederate States of America, named Jefferson Davis as president. Let's see. Union victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg in 1863 marked the turning point in the war, as the Confederates had kind of been doing pretty well. Confederate and Union soldiers met twice in Manassas, Virginia, and the battles were known as the First and Second Battles of Bull Run, and the Confederates won both of those engagements. More than 180,000 black soldiers fought in the Union Army, and by the end of the war, they made up 10% of Union troops. that included both free African Americans and runaway slaves, volunteered as soldiers. And the Union victory meant readmission for the seceded states and ended slavery. Again, it ended in 1865 when the South surrendered in Appomattox, Virginia.
Appomattox.
So then, obviously, some time between the Civil War and the next one I'm getting into. I'm kind of just touching on some of the major wars. Obviously,
Right.
there's
I mean,
the War of 1812.
Technically, really shaped the world that we live in.
Yeah.
These big four.
Especially these next couple I'm going to get into. There's World War I, which took place from 1914 to 1918, but the U.S. was not involved until 1917. The U.S. had a total of 4,734,991 troops involved, with 53,402 casualties. The U.S. joined the Allies, Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and Japan, who were at war with the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. After German submarines began sinking unarmed ships, notably the Lusitania.
Yeah, whatever.
The U.S. declared war on Germany April 6, 1917. Let's see. American troops landed in France and held off German offense in Chateau Thierry. That's probably about the best my French is going to get, because I took Spanish in high school because I live in Texas, but I don't remember any of it.
Amen.
French and American troops stopped a critical German attack just outside Paris in July and August of 1918. Counterattack was ordered, and with the help of the British, the Allies forced Germany back to where its attack began, the Hindenburg Line. World War I was characterized by trench warfare. Each army dug protective trenches along deep rows of ditches dug in the ground in which they slept, ate, and fought against the enemy. A really good movie I would suggest you guys go watch about this one is 1917.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
Very good movie.
That, yeah.
Very good movie. It doesn't. I mean, obviously, it doesn't get into like details of like the war itself, but it tells a story of one specific guy. But it's a very good movie.
It like surround. He's in the trenches.
Yeah. The cinematography. It was just great. I really enjoyed that movie. And the Treaty of Versailles Versailles, however you say. Versailles, whatever. I don't.
There were like 18 treaties of Versailles throughout human history. So
it was signed in 1919 and was one of 5 peace treaties signed after the Central Powers surrendered to the Allies. Germany was forced to acknowledge guilt for the war, pay for the other countries for the damage they caused, and reduce the size of its armed forces. Now, there's also some very good videos out there about how the World War I has completely shaped and totally changed the world that we live in. If it wasn't for World War I, obviously we would not have World War II. And I'll have to do some research, but it's interesting to me that the Germans are forced to acknowledge guilt for the war, but they were on the side of Austria-Hungary, who had, or was it of Austria? Yeah. The guy who assassinated Franz Ferdinand of Austria, heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and Franz Ferdinand's wife, Sophie. So it's interesting to me that, I mean, obviously because they lost because of Victor Wright's history. So it looks like the guy who assassinated him was somewhat of a cessationist himself, because the political objective of the assassination was to break off Austria-Hungary's South Slav provinces so they can be combined into Yugoslavia. So it looked like it was about kind of land mass type stuff. But so Germany again was forced to acknowledge guilt for the war. World War II is 1939 to 45. U.S. had 16,112,566 troops involved and had 291,557 casualties. The U.S. did not get involved until 41. Obviously, D-Day is the big battle in which the Allies launched the Normandy invasion.
Yeah, 44.
On the beaches of northern France, commonly referred as D-Day. The Hacksaw Ridge is another good story out of World War II. Recommend watching that movie.
There's another good World War II movie called Wind Talkers. It's kind of old, but it was about Navajo. I think it was Navajos, but they were Native Americans, and everybody's racist back then, right? Because they're not now.
Yeah,
but all these white soldiers needed a way to talk because the Japanese army broke the code, so they wanted these Native Americans to come in and do their smoke signals or whatever. But it was a really good movie, and I like the actor that played one of the Indians because he was in Last Watch, End of Watch, that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal about the cops, and then he dies.
Yeah.
Not to ruin it for anybody. But like it was a really good movie, you know. So
always
World War II movies. There's a lot of good ones.
I always get End of Watch mixed up with Night Watch, which is that Ben Stiller
Which is
movie.
like a
They're
comedy,
not.
yeah.
They're like the neighborhood watch guys.
Yeah.
And another really good movie to watch about a cool story about this movie is The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
He's a guy that broke the German secret. What was the name? The Enigma machine.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. Look that up. Obviously, I mean World War II. You know, D-Day. Obviously, the U.S. dropped some bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki after Pearl Harbor. Yeah. So and this is the war, obviously, where Franklin Roosevelt ordered Japanese and Japanese Americans to be interned into relocation centers. They were in internment camps, and obviously in the Holocaust as well. I don't want to get into numbers because there's a lot of debate about numbers, but there were people that died in a Holocaust. I'll say that. I mean, and it was there were Jewish people, black people, homosexual people, gypsies, Roman gypsies. You know, there were a whole tons of people.
People deemed undesirable by the government. Yeah,
by the Nazis, and they went after them really hard. This was the largest and most expensive war ever at this point in history, as well as the most difficult to settle. The world remained politically unstable. Major cities had been turned to rubble by bombings, and modern weapons combined with Germany's attempt to exterminate entire religious and ethnic groups brought death to millions of people. I would also suggest to go look up the PragerU video about World War I that talks about how
it led up to World War II.
How World War I has affected World War II, and
they do a really good job of keeping it real short.
Yeah,
the concept's real short. I mean, I remember learning about it in school, but we literally spent one semester leading up to World War I, and then the second semester leading up from World War I to now.
Yeah,
and so it's like it was just this long drawn out thing. But yeah, that PragerU video, they do it in a considerably short amount of time.
Yeah. So and then to skip a little bit more time, get to the Vietnam War. This is one that was really I know affected a lot of the men that fought. Started in 1954 and ended in 1975. The U.S. began involvement in 1961. We had 8,744,000 troops involved with 47,410 deaths, battle deaths. This is when the United States was trying to help non-communist South Vietnam fight invasion by the communist of North Vietnam. The Vietnamese torpedo boats reportedly attacked U.S. destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin on August 2nd, 1964, and President LBJ ordered retaliatory airstrikes, and Congress approved the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which gave permission for U.S. retaliation. So there was some congressional declaration, but it will not.
It wasn't a declaration of war. Yeah,
it was like armed conflict declaration, but so this was one that I don't really. I mean, it's almost like it's similar to the Korean conflict, that we were helping the non-communist South of the country fight the communist North of the country. But Nixon began troop withdrawals from the region in 1969 as massive demonstrations and protests against the war went on in the United States from a bunch of hippies. The U.S. began a military assault in Cambodia in 1970 and later heavily bombed North Vietnam in order to bring them to discussions about ending the conflict. A ceasefire was signed in Paris in 1973. War broke out again in the region after that ceasefire, but North Vietnam's victory in 1975 ended the longest war in which the U.S. had ever been involved. But that has since changed because we are still in war. Still with war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which, again, we kind of talked about those earlier.
Yeah.
So the cause here says that Afghanistan's Taliban government harbored Osama bin Laden, the al-Qaeda terrorist group, who were responsible for September 11th, 2001. After they refused to turn over bin Laden, the U.S. and UN coalition forces attacked. And then Iraq. dictator, the cause, what they're saying the Iraq War was, dictator Saddam Hussein's alleged possession of illegal weapons of mass destruction and Iraq's suspected ties to terrorism prompted the U.S. and Britain to invade and topple his government. However, he did not have weapons of mass destruction. So obviously the media and the government lied about that so they could go to war and get
Also,
some
the
resources.
Taliban government at the time was in
Pakistan.
It is in Pakistan currently.
Yeah.
But they were in a handful of countries, not just Afghanistan. So
Yeah, where there were some Saudi Arabians that were responsible for September 11th. But we're not going to get into that. But yeah, so I mean, and those are wars right now that the United States are still involved in.
Yeah, if you can't tell, we're not really supporters of the war.
Yeah.
But we love the warriors. Like, we support those dudes, like those dudes and the men and women who sacrifice for that, and even the people of those countries that are affected.
Yeah.
The people here who give their moms and dads, who give their brothers and sisters, so that that we don't have to.
Those are
we respect that, but no, we're not really big.
Some facts about the big wars in U.S. history. Obviously, if you're in another country, I'm not very aware of your war history unless you're Britain, and I know we spanked you in the Revolutionary War,
and then we saved you twice. Twice. You think just because you burned down the White House in 1812? That you
came back stronger than ever, bruh.
Debatable, because it was all about money, and we gave them our money. But again, something that we're not getting into right now. But since just across the board, we're not really like, oh, war is great, because that's not really, one, what the Bible teaches, and two, what we learn from history, and three, what we learn from people that we know who have been in war. Yeah, it's just not something that we should really support and be like, oh yeah, we love God. So you would have to draw your own conclusions about this one, but be sure that you use the Bible, right, to formulate as a foundation, and then from there, it's extremely circumstantial. You gotta. I mean, it's your neighbors, it's your family. It might be you. You might be the one going out there with the rifle and the gun, and you gotta sacrifice time and hopefully not your life. You know? So, I just, it's worth talking about, and we will probably address war in some other aspect in some other episode. But the main takeaway, how should believers approach war? War is destruction and death, and it's not good. Yeah. But why should believers fight ever? Should they ever feel comfortable with sending people to war or waging war themselves? And I think that there are times when the circumstances call for it, but make no mistake, there is no circumstance where God's going to be like, hey, go kill that person and take what they got. Yeah. So I think defensive wise, defending yourself, that's okay. I meant to mention this earlier, and I completely spaced. Jesus, when he sent out the 70, the first time, he told them to take swords. The second time, he didn't. Or I might have this spaced up, but he sent out a group of disciples to go and tell people in the surrounding area about him and preach his coming and preach the kingdom of God and preach repentance. And one time, he said, take swords, take food, take extra clothes because it's going to get cold. And then the next time he said, don't take extra clothes, don't take extra food. Just take food for today, and go find somewhere to stay, and leave your swords at home. Yeah. Don't take swords, daggers, nothing. So I think, that's why I'm saying it's circumstantial. You got to follow what the Lord is putting out there for you. But, don't be deceived either. If you really want something real bad, are you coveting, or is that God's plan for you? And sometimes they look the same. Yeah. Yep. Sometimes they look really similar. So with that, please hit us up on social media at GNC Pod for Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to follow us on YouTube. Click subscribe. Would you smash
that subscribe button? Yeah.
And leave a comment. We're on all the podcast platforms now. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Finally, so be sure to share the podcast with anyone that that might have a political conversation to. Might have something to say about it, Be sure to hit us up with any topics that you want us to address, or maybe just open the door for conversation any
questions, any
political questions or something like that. And we will see y'all next Friday.
Make sure to give us a review.
Yes. Leave a review,
how we're
rate,
doing.
because we're on Apple now.
Yeah.
Go ahead and leave a rating because we're on Apple now. So be sure to show us some love. Run over to rsnwrd.com, grab a shirt, help support the podcast, and we will see you Friday.
We out.
Next Friday.